Hi, I'm Glenn.
And I'm Mark.
And welcome to another episode of Masonic Unity, the Right Stuff, Profiles in Masonic Leadership. And we are very happy and honored to be joined here by Right Venerable Seth Anthony, who is the Grand Secretary of the Grand Council of the Allied Masonic Degrees of the United States of America, but he's also the Director of the Museum of Fezology, which you've heard us talk about in some of our past videos.
And today here he is, fresh off his speaker's tour.
Something like that.
Earlier, and I guess right before the book tour.
That's right, yeah. I need to work on that.
Exactly.
So you may be seeing a little bit different background for us. Today we're in Cincinnati Lodge in Morristown, which is my home lodge. We were at the 2023 ingathering for Allied Masonic Degrees just down the road at Madison. But we're here at Cincinnati Lodge on
second floor.
Second floor. So, Seth, we're really happy to have you here. Seth was a speaker at the ingathering, and we wanted to have you join us and talk a little bit about your experiences with collecting, with history, with AMD, leadership,
sure,
anything else that comes up. So, we've talked about the Museum of Fezology because we do have a lot of exhibits about Fezes, about hats. Masons love hats. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience in setting that up in your collections? And
yeah, so I started the whole Fez collecting thing kind of on a whim back in 2008, 2009. Because you go to a flea market, and what's the one thing you can always find in a flea market but an old shrine Fez, right?
Of course, yeah.
Almost guaranteed you can find one. And I thought it was interesting, so I started buying them because they were relatively inexpensive. And then I started finding non-shrine Fezes and learning about those organizations and finding out about them. And just as I had started doing those collections, I met some folks. We were playing trivia at the local pub. And they said, we were at a flea market out near the Reading area. There's a white Fez there. You need to go see what that is. And white Fezes want something I had a ton of experience with.
Right.
So I went and found this place, and little flea market. And there's a white Fez there with what looked to be an elk on it. And I thought, oh, it's supposed to be an elk's Fez. But along the bottom of the Fez were the letters BPOR. And no idea what BPOR meant.
yeah.
So I got this weird Fez, don't know what it is. I paid $20 for it and gladly wandered home and added it to the collection. And about that time is when I had started to post all of my Fezes online as a resource because I was having trouble finding information,
right.
So I figured other people probably are too.
Right.
And I posted my BPOR Fez, and about 6 months or a year later, I get an email out of the blue from somebody who says, I know what that Fez is and I want to talk to you about it. Sure, love to chat. So guy's living in Florida, he's retired, he was originally from the Philadelphia area, and he tells me the Fez comes from the Benevolent and Protective Order of Reindeer.
Wow.
Reindeer, right?
Wow,
And I said,
okay.
all right, well that's a new one for me, let's talk about this. So I called and had about an hour-long phone conversation with them, and the reindeer were developed out of the moose, and the Moose Lodge did not allow African Americans at the time. And they said, well, if we can't be a moose, we'll be a reindeer. Why not? We'll make up our own thing, right? So he tells me this complete history of the Benevolent Protective Order of Reindeer that was very much a northeastern version of the Moose Club. They were very prominent in Philadelphia. We had a great conversation. He explained the Fez and the meaning and all the stuff with it. And at the end of the conversation, I asked him, I really appreciate your time, but why did you take this time to talk to me? And he said, my family doesn't care about this. It's the weird thing I go to do and nobody really understands it, and nobody else wants to hear about it, so I don't tell you, who am I going to tell?
It's going to go away.
Right, and they were down to, at that time, just a couple of hundred members of this organization, and I think they're almost gone now. And I was really touched by that because every hat, every weird thing, there was a guy who cared enough about that organization, who loved it so much that he was going to go to a lodge on a Wednesday night and put on the silly hat and really buy into that. So to me, it's the human stories that go with the funny hat, with that thing.
Right.
And just last month, I received an email from Dr. Theda Scotchpole at Harvard University. She's a sociologist who specializes in African American fraternal societies.
Right.
And lo and behold, the phone call that I had with that gentleman and the information I have is the best record they have of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Reindeer.
Wow.
So she wanted that information for her presentation on African American fraternal groups because they have very little records otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's those individual stories that really the Fez Museum develops out of, that every one of those silly hats, there was a guy behind that hat that really cared about his fraternal experience.
Now, have you ever seen one of those reindeer hats again?
I've seen pictures of them. I've never seen another one come up for auction. They are exceedingly rare. Like I said, there's lots of good old newspaper photos, but you know, who knows what closets they're hiding in or what landfills they might end up in, sadly.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. So, how big is your collection now?
Right now I'm somewhere around 400 Fezes, and I say around because invariably somebody will bring me here's a shrine Fez. And I go, I've got 3 of these. I very much appreciate it, but I've got 3 of them, so I kind of don't count those in the big collection count. Of course. But it's around 400 pieces representing approximately 80 different organizations.
Wow.
And they are not on display. They all live in a cedar-lined closet in containers.
So are they all fraternal or are they service? What kind of?
Primarily fraternal organizations. There's a few other weird things out there. Some of them are what I would call hereditary organizations, like a HEPA, the Greek organization. The Greek American organizations had some Fezes. A couple of them are just for fun. Another great story, I purchased this Fez on eBay. It was yellow, again, weird colors of Fezes with a light blue tassel, and it had a buffalo on it and it said bison. And I searched and searched for what group could this be from. Well, lo and behold, it was from a movie. It was the 1970s movie Roller Coaster. They're at a hotel and there's a fraternal convention happening in the background, and they're all wearing bison's Fezes.
Oh, that's
great. It was a movie prop, so not even a real fraternal group, but I have the Fez for it.
That's very good. So is that your most interesting one, or do you have anything that's really kind of stands out in your mind?
That's certainly an unusual piece. I mean, there's a bunch of different ones that are just from such weird, small, dark corners of the fraternity, from a marching unit. The area of the collection I have specialized a lot in was a group that was attached to the Odd Fellows called the Order of the Muscovites. Unlike most fun fraternal bodies, they were a Russian-themed group instead of an Arabic-themed group. That was really in the Midwest and the far Northwest. So I've taken to collecting a lot of those just because of their rarity and unusual nature.
Yeah, I think we have a Muscovite Fez in our collection. Yeah,
they're great pieces.
It's not very well preserved, but it's
over 100 years old. I guarantee you that.
Exactly. So if we wanted to go and view your collection, what's the site we can go see?
Pretty easy. FezMuseum.com. Everything is on there. I update it maybe twice a year now. It's not as often as it used to be because I just don't get as many new things as I used to. I've kind of tapped out on some of that. But about twice a year I'll post something new, so check it out. Most of the pieces are on there.
Yeah. So are you looking for anything in particular or anything our viewers can keep an eye out for?
If it's not on the website, that's a good chance that I'm looking for it. A lot of the stuff I look for now is things that occurred generally on the west coast of the United States and in small ethnic groups, like the Caballeros de Dimasalang, which was a Filipino fraternal organization that had Fezes.
Interesting.
Again, very kind of insular group because they were Filipinos in the 1920s and 30s. They created a fraternal organization, for themselves, and there was never many of them, right? So it's finding those weird one-off things. So if it's not on the website, it's a good chance I'd be interested in it.
Okay, good, very cool. Now, this also has led you to be involved in the Center for Fraternalism out of Indiana University. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Center for Fraternal Collections and Research is an official research center at Indiana University, all thanks to Dr. Heather Calloway and her work there in setting that up. And that really came about because of another fraternal collection we discovered in Lafayette, Indiana, the J.H. Rathbone Museum, which sort of operates as the unofficial museum of the Knights of Pythias, another fraternal group. And it is you talk about a collection, it's one man's personal collection that he has built into this amazing fraternal warehouse of stuff. And Dr. Ken Motor, he's a professor at Purdue, has spent his life collecting these things and was looking for somewhere to preserve them. And he has a great space, but it's not a permanent space, it's somewhere he's renting and pays for. So we set up the Center for Fraternal Collections and Research to eventually take in Dr. Motor's collection, but also collections of any fraternal group out there. Freemasonry is very blessed to have Masonic museums all around the country, like yours at Trenton, that's preserving New Jersey Masonic history and others. But the Odd Fellows don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
The Red Men don't have that.
Right.
The Knights of Pythias don't have that. So when their lodges close, the records end up in a dumpster out back, and we just lose them.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the center will become the American repository for the fraternal experience across the United States.
That's amazing. So how would we get a chance to see some of the exhibits?
Yeah, so right now there's a building at IU called the McCalla School that we have a room in that they're setting up exhibitions in. Dr. Calloway is working on one of those right now. And she has an off-site warehouse. You think just like the Smithsonian, she's got a warehouse where she's collecting stuff that's coming in, and we're working to build funds to curate all that stuff. That's the big thing. It always takes money, right? To curate all of those things. So she's doing exhibitions there, and you're welcome to contact IU to go see it. If you look up Fraternal Collections IU, you'll stumble across the website. And certainly if you're in Lafayette, Indiana, stop by Dr. Motor's Rathbone Museum.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a look. Yeah, Dr. Calloway has been she's a great supporter of all our museums. She's been to Trenton a few times, and we're a supporter of her work as well.
Absolutely, she does great work.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, you were out here for the AMD, or the Allied Masonic Degrees. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there.
Yeah. So I got involved with the Allied Masonic Degrees just about 10 years ago. My council was chartered 10 years ago this year. And the AMD is, to me, very unique in Freemasonry in that it's a very loose organization. They let the councils do what interests them. Each council can sort of do its own thing, which allows a lot of freedom of expression and creativity in a fraternal environment, which I really like. A lot of councils do research and they do papers and presentations. My council doesn't. We do discussion questions. We have a philosophical discussion on Freemasonry. And each council can do their own thing, which really attracted me to it. And over the years, I got more and more involved because I liked it. And then last year was privileged to be elected to the office of Grand Secretary, where I could help all of the councils now figure out what that fraternal experience is.
That's great.
So we've talked about different experiences, and you've shared about how each one has an individual story. Can you tell us your story? What attracted you to Masonry? How did you become involved? What kind of, what makes Seth Anthony the Mason?
The Mason. So I was 18 years old in high school, and a friend of mine from high school, we had just clicked, and he said, he talked to me about joining DMLA. I was fairly old for a DMLA at 18, but he talked to me about this, and I joke with him that his sales pitch was, all right, I'm going to need you to go to this thing that I can't tell you anything about. You're going to get in a car with a guy you've never known, drive for 6 hours to a place you've never been, to go through a ceremony that we can't talk about, but it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Dumb me, I bought it hook, line, and sinker and said, sure, let's go do this thing, and became very involved in DMLA. It just clicked for me.
Yeah.
I was a state officer in DMLA in Pennsylvania for a couple years, and then of course joined the fraternity shortly thereafter, became involved in my lodge, and that was back in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And then come 2008, I found myself looking for work, and Tom LeBaugh at the Pennsylvania Masonic Youth Foundation, a good New Jersey boy at heart, he offered me a job as a communications director for the Youth Foundation. And
I had no idea about that.
yeah, and then I spent 8 years working for Grand Lodge.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
that's where it all starts.
You've done your time.
I did my time with Grand Lodge. I worked for the Youth Foundation for a little over 6 years, and then spent just under 3 years with our Masonic homes in Pennsylvania in the Public Relations Department. I proudly tell people I'm still the only Mason to have ever worked in the Public Relations Department in Pennsylvania.
Very cool. Yeah, we go out to Elizabethtown fairly often for some of our meetings. A wonderful facility.
The Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania has done amazing work with the Masonic Village there, as well as the Patton campus. It is an A-class facility all the way.
That's great.
100%.
That's great. So, going through your time as a DMLA and then as a Mason, what kind of mentors did you have? We feel like mentorship is such a critical part of growing up as a Mason and succeeding as a Mason. So tell us about your mentors and your experiences there.
Yeah, I think you find mentors depending on where you're at your season in Freemasonry, right? Certainly Tom LeBlanc was a great mentor to me, both as a longtime Mason, as a DMLA advisor, and those folks. And then, in my lodge, there were certain past masters who were great mentors as past masters. In the Allied Masonic degrees, Brother Muhammad Yadam, fantastic mentor, who was Sovereign Grand Master. You find different seasons in your life in Masonry and find mentors in each of those seasons. There's times where I want to have a really fun, I did grotto for a number of years, I was a grotto guy, and you find mentors in that area. How they mentor you in how to have fraternal fun.
Right.
And then you find mentors when you need to learn ritual and when you need to do other things. And for me, the mentor relationship goes both ways. There's a shout out to a very good friend and brother of mine, Mike Moran, who's a retired professor, used to be the editor for the Journal of the Masonic Society's book review section. Mm-hmm. Mike has been a great professional mentor to me and looked at resumes and helps me with my writing and things. Mike came to the fraternity relatively late in life, so I'm a fraternal mentor to Mike.
Right.
So we trade back and forth where we talk, and that's the amazing mentor relationship, is it goes both ways.
That's
in a lot
great.
of cases.
What do you think makes a good or a great mentor? Because you've used that word a couple times.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a great mentor. What made that great?
I think it's the ability to let you find the right way without forcing that. And I think that's where the DMLA program really shines. It is one of the few places that we can let men fail, let young people fail and learn from a mistake. And in our lodges, it's a place where we can let men try something and they can fail and they can learn from that mistake. Mm-hmm. And a mentor that realizes the time, like, let's let them fail. Let's cushion the blow. Don't let it be destroying, but let them fail and learn from that. And it's the mentors who can see those opportunities to teach in a soft way. Yeah, I think is part of it.
Much like a parent.
In a sort of way, yeah. And Tom, if you think you're a parent, you're not wrong. I'll pick on Tom a lot.
No, that's great. Yeah, we have such an importance in mentors in the fraternity, but also outside in business and industry. As you're saying, I think it's such a critical
in life
thing.
overall.
In life
it's very
overall.
important to have that one.
No doubt.
And that leads us into talking about leadership, because how do you grow as a leader? You have a mentor. Tell us your experiences with leadership in the collecting community, in AMD, in your lodge. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, you guys are leaders in the collecting community for sure, 100%. And it's such a small world, right? The folks who are taking the time to do this work and preserve and learning who those folks are and what their specialties are. Everybody's got something they're really interested in and good at. And finding those leaders to connect with and talk to is really important. From a lodge standpoint or a fraternal standpoint, it's always building on the experience, right? I'm working on a project now for our grand chapter and talking about the importance of a man being a high priest of a chapter perhaps before he's master of a lodge, because it gives him a chance to preside in a chapter and get a feel for what that's like before he's in a bigger, more strict lodge environment. As a grand secretary and in my secretary work, I had a great experience being a secretary for the very small corner of Freemasonry that is St. Thomas of Acon, a chivalric order. But that taught me the basics of being a national secretary. I got 40 chapels. How do you wrangle 40 different chapels? How do you interact with 40 different grand lodges? How do you interact internationally? That gave me the basic experience I needed to then move into the AMD role that goes from 40 local units to 400 local units with a much bigger perspective. It's a building sequence of leadership. You can't get it all at once.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's really critical, and I feel like we're all leaders, in everything that we do, and we should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It takes one of the best parts about being a national Masonic leader is realizing how much influence a grand lodge has on a local body, even an appendant body. Because the way they do things, you realize that's a very New Jersey way to handle that thing that we would just not naturally do that in Pennsylvania or in Texas or in California. And you see how their Masonic experience is influencing this appendant body, because we all bring our own leadership experiences to those organizations.
How do you deal with that? How do you deal with multiple grand lodges, multiple regions, funneling into one central
I'll let you in on a secret. Grandmasters are always right.
Well,
That's a really,
we know that,
that's
right?
a really important secret.
We know that, right?
But seriously, with Grand Lodges, it's a matter of respecting what their traditions and forms are. And it's not that one is more correct than another. It's just a different tradition and a different form. And knowing that experience comes from 200 years of that Grand Lodge and just the way they've done things. So it forces you as an appendant body to adapt a little bit to that and have that give and take and say, yeah, this works for you guys. It doesn't change how we are.
Yeah.
So let's find...
Without losing your own identity by understanding.
Yeah.
It's like accepting one another as all equals within a Masonic
toleration.
law. Yeah.
It's an amazing
Yeah.
virtue, right?
Yeah.
Funny how that happens.
And communication. I think it comes down to good, transparent communication on both sides.
Absolutely. And it's understanding where you're coming from. I'm not speaking out of line. St. Thomas of Acon right now is working on establishing a new chapel in Alabama. Grand Lodge of Alabama's never had Acon. So they're trying to understand, what is this organization? Where does it come from? How does it operate? And at the same time, we're trying to figure out how to adapt to how the Grand Lodge of Alabama operates and meet in the middle and make that work. And that's a positive Grand Lodge relationship that every appendant body needs to have.
That's so important. That's so important. So, we've talked about the past. We've talked about the present. Where do you see things going in the future? From either Masonry or MD or
The Museum of Fezology.
Museum of Fezology.
Well, that's...
We're looking at satellite offices across
I
the
foresee that
country.
museum staying in a cedar-lined closet for a moment. But I think Masonry's on the move, right? And it's a matter of understanding that we're not going to be that fraternity that was there in the 60s and the 70s that was artificially large.
Yep.
We enjoyed that time, we made good use of that time,
Right.
but that's not where the fraternity is going to be. So we have to understand, where do we fit in now, into that next generation? And it's not the same group that was the community leaders, per se, the politicians and those folks. It's good men doing work in the community that aren't necessarily looking for that recognition.
Right.
That's really where Freemasonry is going to be. It's a quiet influence on the community, I think, instead of the very large public influence that we once had. And that's okay. The fraternity has to evolve and change in that. And there's great interest in it. As a millennial, I see my generation having great interest in the fraternity, and the group's growing, where AMD is growing. So it's a matter of striking the right chord and finding the right people, but realizing where those limitations might be.
Yeah.
So trying to find that relevance.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question, Grand High Priest. This is my PA chapter guys like this. What is the purpose of chapter?
Chapter?
What's the purpose of chapter?
I would say bringing more light, enhancing the relationship that they learned in the Master Mason degree, kind of expanding past that and giving them more education, more light. Same thing that all the appendant bodies claim to want to do.
Right. And this is something we're talking about in Pennsylvania. What's the place that chapter holds? It used to be where past masters went after they were done being master. And now that's switched a little bit. Right?
And that is a whole school of thought where you did worship master, then you did the other appendant bodies in the right order.
Right.
And others,
under quotes.
Other, yes. R-I-G-H-T, not
right
R-I-T.
Right.
And then others who feel like you ought to be able to be relaxed and comfortable to make your mistakes, so that when you are in the East within a lodge, that you excel. And I've heard arguments and discussions both ways, trying to talk about, what's the better format? Well, it depends upon so many other variables.
Right.
The individual, the state, how accepting are they of, hey, your guy's going to make a mistake. How hard are you going to be on that guy making a mistake? And that's having that proper mentor who can mitigate those leadership things that you're trying to learn. And understanding that just because we've done it this way doesn't mean it won't work now.
Right. Right.
So when I came in as worshipful master, it was, I came up with all these great ideas. Having a past master's breakfast and having meetings with the officers. And I'm sitting there at the past master's breakfast and they're all like, yeah, we used to do this back in the 70s. And it's like, so there's really nothing new.
Right.
It's just finding the right time to apply some of that
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah. Same thing with Royal Arch.
Yeah.
That's been sort of my carrying call this year, basically saying, the quality within the Royal Arch should be the same as someone who's receiving their Master Mason degree, as should all of our degrees, like the AMD degrees that we did today.
Yeah.
Guys did great.
It should be something that makes you go, wow, that spoke to me. Where I'm at right now, that made a lot of sense. Or being able to acknowledge that I'm not in the right place to really understand or be accepting of all that.
Sure.
But as you were saying before, is that it depends upon that time within your life.
Right.
You know, and as you grow, as you have more experiences, and what you can bring to the table.
No doubt. No doubt.
So thank you for the question.
No,
That was
it's
good. That was
something,
very good
it's
question.
something we're talking about because each of these, it's easy to look at Freemasonry, there's too many attendant bodies, right?
Right.
That's an oft-quoted problem. But if you understand the purpose of them and why guys are attracted to them, they all have their place. And their place changes over time.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not always going to be the same place where once it was the thing guys did after they were master, and now it's sort of the thing they do before they're master. And that's okay.
Yeah.
We found a place for it.
Yeah. I think that's very healthy because it shows growth.
Right.
And that's what we're all about, is growing as men, growing as individuals.
Smoothing the Ashland.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very true.
You can't become better if you just stay good.
That's a good quote.
That's for
I might
sure.
have to use that.
That's for sure. Well, we want to thank you for being here
My
with us.
pleasure.
Anything you'd like to pass on to our viewers before we close it out?
Oh, geez. Well,
Besides buying your book on Fezology?
no books
books
to
here?
sell.
Okay.
But certainly, I encourage you to check out the Center for Fraternal Collections and Research at IU. We're happy to take whatever donations you have, both of dollars. That's always good, but stuff too. If you see a lodge closing or they need some help, please reach out to us, and we want to save that fraternal history.
And your Fezology webpage once again?
Again, fezmuseum.com. It'll be there for you.
Check it out. It is a great site. I've been there many times, so I've seen stuff that just floors me.
All good stuff.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for the opportunity,
Take
gentlemen.
care.
See you around the quarries. Don't forget to subscribe down below so you see more of these exciting videos and interviews.
Indeed. We'll see you soon. Take care.